In the quiet village of Windmere Hollow, nestled between misty hills and ancient woods, there lived a man named Elliot Thorne. Elliot was a clockmaker, not just any clockmaker, but one whose creations whispered secrets and remembered dreams. His shop sat at the end of a cobbled lane, its windows always fogged with the scent of cedar and brass. Inside, hundreds of clocks ticked in harmony, each one tuned to a different rhythm of the world. Some ticked with the heartbeat of the ocean, others with the sigh of the wind through pine trees. One, it was said, ticked with the memory of a lost love. Elliot was a solitary man. He spoke little, smiled rarely, and worked always. But those who visited his shop swore they left feeling lighter, as if time itself had forgiven them. He had lived in Windmere Hollow for over 40 years. No one knew where he came from. Some said he had once been a sailor, others a scholar. But Elliot never spoke of the past. He only spoke of gears, springs, and the delicate balance of time. Each morning, he would rise before the sun, brew a cup of black tea, and wind every clock in his shop. It was a ritual, sacred and precise. The ticking began slowly, then built into a symphony, a quiet orchestra of time. One rainy evening, just as the village lamps flickered to life, a woman named Clara arrived at Elliot's door. She was soaked to the bone, her eyes tired but curious. "I heard you make clocks that remember," she said. Elliot nodded. "Some do." "I need one that forgets," she whispered. Elliot paused. "What would you have it forget?" Clara looked down. A name, a moment, a promise I couldn't keep. Elliot led her to the back of the shop, where a single clock stood alone. It was made of pale wood and silver gears, and it ticked backwards. "This one," he said, "was built for forgetting, but it comes at a price." Clara didn't ask what the price was. She simply placed her hand on the clock, closed her eyes, and listened. The ticking grew louder. The room dimmed. Outside, the rain slowed to a hush, and then silence. When Clara opened her eyes, she smiled faintly. "I don't remember what I came here for," she said. Elliot nodded. Then it worked. She left without another word. Days passed, then weeks. Elliot continued his work, but something had changed. The clocks ticked differently. One chimed at midnight with a melody he didn't recognize. Another began to hum softly, like a lullaby from a forgotten childhood. One morning, Elliot found a note tucked beneath the backward clock. It read, "Thank you. I remember now what peace feels like." Elliot smiled for the first time in years. That night, he closed the shop early and walked into the woods. The trees whispered his name. The stars blinked slowly overhead. He sat beneath an old oak and listened, not to the ticking of clocks, but to the rhythm of his own breath. And for the first time, Elliot Thorne, the clockmaker of Windmere Hollow, allowed himself to rest. But rest was not sleep. Not yet. The next day, a boy named Theo came to the shop. He was no older than 10, with wide eyes and a pocket full of marbles. "My grandfather says you made him a clock that sings," Theo said. Elliot nodded. I did. Can you make one that tells stories? Elliot raised an eyebrow. Stories? Theo nodded. I get scared at night. I want a clock that tells me a story until I fall asleep. Elliot thought for a long moment. Then he led Theo to a small workbench and began to sketch. The clock he built was shaped like a crescent moon. Its pendulum was a silver feather, and its face was etched with tiny constellations. Inside, he placed a mechanism that played soft spoken words, fragments of fairy tales, myths, and dreams. When Theo returned a week later, Elliot handed him the clock. It won't tell the same story twice, he said, but it will always end with a happy thought. Theo beamed. Thank you. That night, Elliot sat alone in his shop, listening to the ticking. He wondered what stories the clock would tell. He wondered if, perhaps, he should make one for himself. He began to dream again. Not long after, a man named Julian arrived. He was tall, with silver hair and a voice like velvet. I need a clock that forgives, he said. Elliot didn't ask what needed forgiving. He simply nodded and began to work. This clock was made of dark walnut and gold. Its hands moved slowly, almost reluctantly. At midnight, it released a soft chime, like a sigh. When Julian returned, he placed his hand on the clock and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. The clock ticked once, then twice. Julian smiled. It forgave me. Elliot watched him leave, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his own regrets. He built a clock for himself that night. It was small, simple, and silent. It didn't tick. It didn't chime. It simply sat on his bedside table, reminding him that time was not always measured in seconds. Sometimes it was measured in healing. Years passed. The village changed. Children grew. Lovers aged. But Elliot remained. His clocks filled homes, hearts, and dreams. One day, the mayor of Windmere Hollow came to Elliot with a request. We want to build a clock tower, he said, a gift to the village. Elliot agreed. He designed a tower that rose like a tree, with branches of brass and leaves of glass. At its center was a great clock, tuned to the rhythm of the seasons. In spring, it chimed with birdsong. In summer, with laughter. In autumn, with wind. In winter, with silence. The villagers gathered for its unveiling. As the clock struck noon, a melody filled the air, one composed by Elliot himself. It was a song of time, memory, and hope. Elliot stood beneath the tower, watching the faces of those he had touched. He saw Clara, now smiling and free. He saw Theo, now grown, holding his own child. He saw Julian, walking hand in hand with someone new, and Elliot knew his time was complete. That night, he returned to his shop, wound every clock one last time, and placed a note on the door. It read, "Time is yours now. Use it gently." He walked into the woods, beneath the stars, and vanished. Some say he became a clock himself. Others say he became a whisper in the wind. But the clocks of Windmere Hollow still tick. And if you listen closely, you might hear them speak. Sleep well, traveler. Time is gentle here.